Goodman, Roger Goodman, our director, because this is, we've seen footage before of people on the run, and I understand that that's your shadow as you went by a storefront.
Yeah, actually,
right?
it was. It's the first time I've seen that.
And was there absolute panic immediately?
Instantly. It was just pandemonium. Nobody knew what to do. There was no clear thinking. People were just reacting to kind of save themselves and the people around them.
You're in the same location when the building comes down.
I had been taken downstairs by Port Authority police who knew that I had this videotape. And we were moving actually to go back to the Trinity Church to make them a dub of the tape in a format that they could use on a VHS tape. And suddenly I heard one of the guys say, "Hey, Evan, watch out."
Hang on just a second. If you look in the upper, this now is frozen. This is an angle of this attack that we have not seen before. At the top of the building on your left, out of the left, will come the building. And watch how the aircraft penetrates the building. Go ahead. Completely in one side and out the other.
It just disappeared. It disappeared.
And it just slammed right into it and was completely engulfed.
We felt this kind of this sonic boom as if it were an earthquake.
Today we've had a national tragedy. Terrorism against our nation will not stand.
And about the time I saw the plane, I watched it come in very low over the trees, and it just dipped down, came down right over 395, right into the Pentagon.
May God bless the victims, their families, and America.
This is a special report from ABC 7 News, America Under Attack.
New York's mayor calls it one of the most heinous acts in the world's history. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Dale Walters.
And I'm Kathleen Matthews. This is a day that will ultimately change our lives, a horrific sequence of events with a profound effect on the Washington area. And that's what we're going to focus on during this special report. We start with ABC 7 News reporter Carol Costello, who looks at the events of the past 8 hours.
I don't know if you guys really realized what the date is today. It's 9/11, which is 911. Don't know if it means anything, but it's very creepy. But September 11th will now be one of those terrible days when we will always remember where we were, like the day the Challenger exploded or President Kennedy was shot. Let me take you back now to 8:45 this morning.
It was around 8:45, a beautiful, clear day in New York. Then, a horrible accident.
Well, we just got a report in that there's been some sort of explosion at the World Trade Center.
But minutes later, we learned it was no accident.
There's another one. I'm taking a look. Oh my God! Oh my God!
Take another look. A second plane with people on board flies directly into the South Tower. New York emergency crews watch in vain as people trapped by the flames beg for their help. It couldn't come. By 9:30, the president in Sarasota, Florida, confirms what we already know.
2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence.
But it wasn't over. By 9:40, a third plane crashes through the Pentagon. Suddenly, our own city is in crisis as thousands of terrified people flee the district. Government offices are closed. Schools are shut down.
Unless you have specific business, stay off the streets right now.
This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the 2 towers. A huge explosion now raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way.
20 minutes later, at 10 o'clock, the first tower of the World Trade Center collapses. At the same time, United Flight 93 crashes 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. 38 minutes later, another explosion levels the second tower of the World Trade Center. By 1 o'clock, the president, now in Louisiana, threatens action.
But make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test.
And it will be a test, an emotional, painful one, as New York, Washington, the country mourn thousands of Americans killed by a faceless enemy.
And right now, 2 aircraft carriers out of Norfolk, the John F. Kennedy and the Roosevelt, are headed to New York Harbor. Now, we understand the president has flown into Nebraska now. He will be heading back to Washington. Right now, there are still no claims of responsibility officially, but we have word from two different sources that the man behind this attack is Osama bin Laden. Del, Kathleen?
Carol, thank you very much. Ground zero in our area is the Pentagon, where the search for victims continues at this very hour. The plane landed on the northwest side of the Pentagon near the heliport. ABC 7 News reporter Daryl Carver continues our coverage from there. Daryl?
Del, the best thing we can do right now is actually show you some of the damage and some of what else is out here. There's been a lot of heavy equipment moved into the scene for the rescue efforts that are soon to get underway. Also, we've been told that the Fairfax County Elite Search and Rescue Team is also on the scene preparing to work once the fire is put out inside. What they have ahead of them, as well as all these other rescue workers, is a massive recovery effort. Early on, heavy flames and smoke could be seen from Route 27. Fire crews began immediately working on the blaze. We've been told that you can see pieces of the plane in the corridors of the Pentagon's outer E-ring. Military personnel and civilians are said to be on the scene to help remove the injured and dead. We've also been told that the Secretary of Defense is on the scene and working closely with Pentagon officials. One witness describes to us what he heard at 9:30 this morning.
I did not hear the first crash, but I did hear the second explosion that occurred. There was another explosion that occurred, and we could hear it in Crystal City quite profoundly. We were in a meeting there, and we could hear it quite profoundly. We wasn't sure if it was another attack or if it was a gas main that occurred there, but we could see the clouds coming all over, and of course the odor.
The impact was on the outer ring, which is the E-ring. It appears though the plane went in to the E, D, and to the C ring. Not all the way through the C ring.
Now, if you are Navy or Marine Corps personnel assigned to the Pentagon wants to hear from you. The number is 877-663-6772. Number again, 1-877-663-6772. Now, joining me live out here is Jim Clark, our own Jim Clark, who is a veteran of the scene here in Washington. Have you ever seen a day quite like this?
No, Daryl, I have not. I have weathered many a crisis here at the Pentagon in my years as a reporter here, but I've never seen anything quite like this. You know, a short while ago, the Assistant Defense Secretary Victoria Clark called this a terrible day for America. One would be hard put, very hard put, to find a better description. These coordinated terrorist strikes hit the symbols of our economic and military power, and they most likely have killed and wounded hundreds of our fellow Americans. Reminiscent of another terrible day, the attack on Pearl Harbor. President Bush is somewhere in a secure command post conferring with his aides, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld, Vice President Cheney. He promises we will hunt down and punish those responsible for this. It seems likely there will be a swift response. No waiting to sift through all the debris here at the Pentagon. The Khobar Towers attack, the attack on the USS Cole were terrible, but this is far worse. Likely targets will be those known to harbor terrorists like Osama bin Laden, but it could go beyond that to a broad range of the usual suspects. It is important, they say at times like this, to respond, but also important to hit the right targets. And you can bet the CIA, the DIA, and the FBI are busy right at this time working to help do that. Defense Secretary Rumsfeld is here in the Pentagon. He is said to be conferring with top brass. All of the Joint Chiefs have been located. All of the defense secretaries are here, none of them injured. Right now, the number one priority here is to try to find and rescue any survivors who may still be trapped in this burning section of the Pentagon. Good news, it seems to be in the last few minutes they've been able to put down some of the fire here, which appeared to be spreading through the attic. Back to you.
Okay, Jim, thanks very much. Now, as we've reported, the plane that crashed into the Pentagon took off from Dulles Airport. ABC 7 News reporter Susan Roberts joins us live on the telephone from a nearby hotel where the victims' families are gathering. Susan, what's the scene there?
Hi, Kathleen Dell. Well, a command center for the victims' families of American Airlines flight number 77 has been set up here at the Dulles Marriott, just right across the street from the Dulles Airport. American Airlines, as you said, has confirmed to us in a statement that 58 passengers, 4 flight attendants, and 2 pilots were on board the lost plane that crashed at the Pentagon. Those victims' families will be escorted to a private area here at the hotel. So far, we have not seen any of them just yet. Now, at Dulles Airport today, the FBI did do a sweep of the airport looking for any signs or clues as to exactly what might have happened. Throughout the day, we did see F-15 fighter planes flying over the airport as well. Like all of the airports in the country today, Dulles was shut down. A dozen or so airline employees are still scattered throughout the airport this evening. Flags have been lowered at Dulles, as they have been all throughout the nation today. Now, the hotel here tonight is at full capacity with people who were trying to fly out of here, as well as those who were rerouted here. You know, it is a very somber scene out here. The Red Cross is set up. They're anticipating having to greet these families tonight. It's going to be a very, very long and emotional night. We are in Fairfax County at the Dulles Marriott. Del, Kathleen.
Susan, thank you very much. We want to update you on another situation that is developing. The large number of injuries means that there is a shortage of blood. And today, as ABC 7 News reporter Don Hudson shows us, people in our area immediately jumped up to try and help.
It's the least we can do. Betty Pyle is one of hundreds of local citizens who have been moved to action because of this terrorist tragedy.
It's so unbelievable, and it seems so helpless to do nothing. So I have good blood. I'm healthy.
For many, this really is an unfortunate opportunity to try to help in some little way.
There's never enough blood, and you always say to yourself, oh yeah, I need to give blood, I need to give blood, I need to give blood, but you never do it. So today, there's a real need for blood.
And for some, giving blood also means giving up a lot of time. At this point in the line, it might take 3, maybe even 4 hours. But those we talk to say it's worth it.
If we can just do a little bit, just even to help the people who are going to be impacted by the blood that's used today, then we might as well.
In Northwest Washington, Don Hudson, ABC 7 News.
The American Red Cross has extended hours for blood donations at 2 other locations. The Fairfax Donor Center, you can see the information on your screen there, at 22810 Old Lee Highway, Suite 200, and the Rockville Donor Center at 11820 Park Lawn Drive. The donor heartlines, which are being overloaded, we are being told, are 1-800-GIVE-LIFE and 1-888-BLOOD-88. If you call, the Red Cross asks you please to be patient.
Now, the attacks today, especially the attack here at the Pentagon, led to dozens of local school cancellations. ABC 7 News reporter Greta Cruz is in our newsroom right now to update families on what they can expect tomorrow. Greta, what's the latest there?
Well, Kathleen, even our children have been affected by all of this. Now, some of the schools closed early today, none of them directly affected by the attacks, of course, but mirroring the overall anxiety and uncertainty in the Washington area. Here's what we have right now. These colleges and universities have canceled their classes for tonight. American University, Bowie State, Catholic University, College of Southern Maryland, Columbia Union College, Georgetown University, George Mason University, George Washington University and Law Center, Howard University, Johns Hopkins University, which includes the Baltimore and Washington area campuses, Marymount University, Montgomery College, National Louis University, University of Phoenix, Maryland, Potomac College, Southern Maryland Higher Education Center, Southeastern University, Stratford College, Trinity College, and also UDC. No classes tonight. Also, local school districts have also canceled evening activities. You should check with your local district. But at this point, the only schools who have notified us that they will be closed tomorrow are Anne Arundel County Public Schools, closed tomorrow, the schools associated with the National Cathedral, which of course includes St. Albans, NCS, and Beauvoir, Potomac School in McLean, and St. Stephen's and St. Agnes in Alexandria. Now, some of the schools plan to have counselors on hand to help with the kids. A few other cancellations to pass along. The Kennedy Center has canceled evening performances tonight. All Major League Baseball games canceled tonight, including the O's, and D.C. United soccer game for tomorrow night also canceled. Some of the malls around here were even closed today. Pentagon City, Tyson's, Montgomery Mall, all underscoring just how deeply this tragedy has touched virtually every facet of life here. Back to you.
Greta, thank you very much. And we want to reiterate that the cancellations that Greta just mentioned, you can see at the top of the screen. They will be here throughout the hour. Now, those injured in the Pentagon attack were taken to several area hospitals, including Virginia Hospital Center in Arlington. And that's where ABC 7 News reporter Dale Solly is standing by live now with the details there. Dale?
Del, the numbers have been changing, the numbers of people brought in through the course of the day, and unfortunately those numbers, as one might well expect, continue to go up. Just a few moments ago, 3 more EMS personnel were brought in. That brings to 36 people. 36 people have been brought here. 14 of them have been admitted. A hospital spokesman told us just a few moments ago that 8 of them are currently in intensive care. For everyone here, it has been a harrowing day. This is the Pentagon's official hospital, and the military bombing victims poured in by ambulance and private vehicles alike, stunned survivors of America's day of terror.
Once we saw the plane and I yelled, that's the last time I saw the plane. We were going in the other direction, and there was no doubt that it was going to hit the building. Yeah.
What went through your mind at the time?
Fortunately, nothing metallic.
The Pentagon set out a call for blood donors as extra supplies of the stuff arrived. The hospital has implemented its disaster plan, calling in extra medical personnel to handle the crush of new patients.
The folks that ended up in the intensive care unit were patients who had smoke inhalation predominantly. There are also some trauma in their injuries as well. A femur fracture you're already aware of. Several folks were intubated, which means they're placed on respirators or breathing machines. And those patients, that was done because of significant smoke inhalation.
Some of the injuries are life-threatening, others are cuts and bruises and the shock of what they went through. It is much the same at other area hospitals as well. At Washington Hospital Center, at Georgetown, at Inova Fairfax, much the same scene as well. I will also tell you, Del and Kathleen, that in the last few moments we have learned that Arlington County has now declared a state of emergency. And what that does is clear county officials to call for federal assistance. We've not heard any word as far as National Guard's troops, but they have in fact declared a state of emergency here in Arlington County as well. So again, the numbers continue to go up. We will continue to stay here and we will keep you posted. Reporting live in Arlington, Dale Solly, ABC 7 News. Back to you.
Dale, thank you. And Arlington County joins a growing list of counties and states that have done similar things. States of emergency are in effect in the District, Virginia, and in the state of Maryland tonight. Maryland Governor Paris Glendening says that state police there have received some credible threats. Maryland State Police got a list, they say, of 11 sites across the nation that were targets, including the state capitol in Annapolis. The State House, according to the governor, has been evacuated, and 2 of the targeted buildings, we are being told, have been searched. After the Pentagon attack, Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore declared a state of emergency in Virginia, but he says no other Virginia site is known to be threatened. Kathleen?
Well, as Dell said, Mayor Anthony Williams declared a state of emergency in the district following this morning's attacks. ABC 7 News reporter Gail Pennybacher is live at D.C.'s Office of Emergency Management with more on how the city is responding. What's the latest from there, Gail?
The latest is that the mayor is holding a news conference right now inside the Reeves Center. Kathleen, he is giving the public an update about every hour on the status of this state of emergency. He made the announcement shortly after 1 o'clock this afternoon. It includes enlisting the help of the D.C. National Guard, and ABC 7 News has learned that includes F-16s from the D.C. Air National Guard patrolling the city and having orders to shoot down any unauthorized aircraft. In the meantime, the mayor has been calling for calm in the city despite this state of emergency.
Again, we're declaring a state of emergency in order to put everyone on alert, in order to ensure that we have the highest level of preparedness. Obviously, if something were to happen, God forbid, and we pray that it won't, we will be fully prepared to then execute the necessary contingency plans.
And of course, the mayor says he will keep the public updated on the status of this state of emergency. At this point, D.C. public schools will go to school tomorrow, and D.C. public office buildings will be open. They are in a lockdown status here tonight at the Reeves Center. Reporting live from Washington, D.C., Gail Pennybacher, ABC 7 News.
Gail, thanks very much.
In order to get people home, area traffic lights were reprogrammed to afternoon rush, and that happened sometime before noon.
That's right. Many other roads were actually closed except to emergency vehicles. Now, for more on the traffic situation, we turn to Metro Traffic's Kim Alexander. Tell us what's going on, Kim.
A surreal scene on a very surreal day. Apparently, the mayor's office has just reopened the 14th Street Bridge. You can see a few cars starting to travel across. The state of emergency did the effective job of clearing the streets. Really, downtown, there's not a whole lot going on. Go over to the map, and I'll show you some road closures that we've been dealing with all day. We had the area around the White House. Okay, we won't go to the map. We've had the area around the U.S. Capitol exit. There we are. The U.S. Capitol building and the White House. The streets were all closed. Apparently, the mayor is picking up some of those road closures. But as far as we know, the George Washington Parkway southbound heading towards National Airport remains closed. The Memorial Bridge apparently and the Key Bridge have been just opened. The state of emergency is still under effect, and if it's at all possible, they're suggesting that you don't drive around downtown this evening. The roads around the Pentagon and National Airport obviously still are closed, and we have no way of knowing how long that's going to be in effect. Back to you.
Okay. Thank you, Kim.
Well, Metro remained open all day, although several of the stations were actually closed.
And we're joined on the phone right now by Metro spokeswoman Cheryl Johnson. And Cheryl, first of all, how did the evacuation, the people leaving the city, how did that transition take place? Was it orderly?
As far as we know, of course, we did get a lot of extra people returning into our system this morning and very early afternoon because, of course, the federal government and the D.C. governments were shut down. As a matter of fact, we know that we had approximately 90,000 more people entering our system to return home by 12:30 this afternoon, and that's 90,000 more than we would have seen, say, last Tuesday.
What were the stations that were closed, Cheryl, and how did you handle that?
We were sending trains through the Pentagon Metro Station and through the National Airport Station, but we were not stopping at those stations to provide service to those stations. We shut down the Pentagon Station at 9:45 this morning and the National Airport Station at 11:57 a.m.
Will those stations be reopened tomorrow, and will Metro be running on a normal schedule tomorrow?
We plan to have service tomorrow. The level and kind of service we don't know at this time because we will be conferring with other agencies, governmental bodies, and to find out just what is going to happen in terms of federal employees returning to work. I just heard you guys announce that the mayor had said, of course, D.C. government employees will be returning to work. So we know we will have some service. What we don't know is, will the Pentagon Station and the National Airport Station remain closed, or will they be open? But we should know later on this evening.
Cheryl, we'll continue to check in with you. Thanks for the update.
And the nation's air traffic, while we were talking about the rails, let's talk about the skies. The nation's air traffic came to a virtual standstill just minutes after the crashes as all planes nationwide were grounded. And at this hour, the airports remain closed. ABC 7 News reporter Sam Ford is live outside National Airport. He has more on that part of the story. Sam?
Yes, Del. Well, a spokesperson for the FAA said that they knew before the first plane hit the first World Trade Center tower that the plane had been hijacked. And within an hour, they had called for a national ground stop that was imposed at 9:30 this morning, closing off all air traffic around the country. And the FAA says it will remain in effect until at least noon tomorrow. The civilian aircraft in this country are grounded with the exception, the FAA said, of a few international flights that had not yet arrived. And of course, Reagan National is closed. No flights at all. Within minutes of the crash into the Pentagon, officials ordered the evacuation of nearby Reagan National Airport, where the smoke from the crash was clearly visible. Minutes later, passengers and employees streamed out.
I was watching on the TV in there about the Trade Center and didn't walk out here and see the Pentagon, so I'm sure it's because of terrorist attacks.
Groups gathered at the extremities of the airport away from the main terminal building. One man had arrived earlier from New York, had left by cab and been brought back.
We're driving by the Pentagon when the explosion occurred.
Oh, really?
And, yeah, so...
you were on your way here to the airport?
No, actually in a meeting downtown, and the cab driver turned around and said he wasn't going to go down there. So left me off here. So now I've got to figure out how to get to a motel, like it looks like.
The airport remained closed except for one small VIP jet, which was escorted to National by a jet fighter. Jet fighters occasionally flew over the airport and Pentagon area. On the George Washington National Parkway, pedestrians streamed near the airport like refugees. Some were evacuees from the Pentagon who'd walked 2.5 miles.
Left the Pentagon
We passed most of the kids in the nursery, and they were fine. They were keeping them together. We got on this path, and we were trying to walk down to Old Town, but they just closed the path by National Airport.
And again, a national ground stop, which means that civilian aircraft are grounded in this country until at least noon tomorrow. And I would say that I have some relatives in the Midwest, in Kansas, who they tell me the news there is that a number of the transatlantic flights had to come down right away, and you have lots of airport planes stacked up at places like Wichita and Great Bend. Reporting live from Reagan National Airport, Sam Ford, ABC 7 News.
Sam, thank you very much.
Well, joining us now to help us understand how the government will investigate this and also respond to the attacks is Robert McFarland. He's the National Security Advisor to President Reagan. And Mr. McFarland, this was obviously, the product of a well-planned act of terrorism. You told me earlier you believe Osama bin Laden is behind it. What makes you sure of that?
Well, Kathleen, an attack like this requires an extremely sophisticated network of communications and the financial means and hardware to position people to be able to carry out the coordinated attack that occurred today. There are only one or two cells with the financial means and the skills and training opportunities to be able to pull something like this off, and bin Laden is one of the key figures.
I asked you earlier on this same topic how long it would take for a terrorist group to plan such an attack, and I was actually amazed at your answer because I thought the time period was short. You told me 6 months.
Something like this must be rehearsed, planned, contingencies considered, and communications in redundant places established, and it is not an easy thing to do.
I want to take you back to 1993 and the first attack on the World Trade Center buildings, in which bin Laden and some of his, people who worked for him around the world claimed responsibility. Do you see this as finishing up that business? Is that how you view this attack today?
Well, I think that bin Laden personally would want to demonstrate a vindication of this earlier attack and a demonstration to the world of what he will allege is the impotence of the American government. Bin Laden has a fanatical zeal to try to discredit our own government and all Western influence from throughout his region, and yet that 93 attack is something that he wanted to finish.
And of course we have to remind ourselves he was also behind the attacks on the embassies in Africa a couple of years ago.
I want to ask a question I think that is on the minds of a lot of our viewers. There are a lot of them, but as we were coming in this morning, it hit us all the same way. One attack, two attack, then in our own backyard. Can we believe with any degree of certainty that with regards to the attacks, we're out of the woods?
We cannot be absolutely certain. It seems likely that the sites that were hit were very purposefully hit to first vindicate the earlier attack and secondly to expose vulnerability of our government here, and that has been done clearly. Bill, for 25 years, the dilemma of American government in trying to preserve freedom of movement for our own people is to deal with this, and the fact is that we cannot. If we're going to cope with this kind of thing in the future, we have to go to the source of where it's planned and to go after those who are planning it.
And briefly, when should we expect to see from the President from a national security standpoint as to the way the plans are planned out when you hold your briefings?
Well, the President has done today what a continuity of government plan requires, and he's done exactly the right thing. But he'll convene the National Security Council, and you can expect that there will be a firm plan of action here within a matter of days.
Mr. McFarland, thank you very much.
Well, as soon as the attack on the Pentagon became known, there was traffic chaos downtown with the mass exodus out of the city. And ABC 7 News reporter Suzanne Kennedy is live from the mall on more with all that, how that proceeded. Suzanne?
Kathleen, it is much like a ghost town down here on the National Mall, as it has been for several hours. For the most part, the only people down here are a few tourists who are trying to salvage what is left of this historic and very sad day. Hours ago, thousands of workers who are employees here in the district fled from the heart of this city. It was a mass exodus, the likes of which Washington, D.C. has never seen before.
It's just chaos. Traffic is just moving at a minimum.
It's been gridlock. It's like a snow day.
Thousands of people fled the district in the hours immediately following the Pentagon attack. Scared residents trying to get to safety.
I'm walking to Chevy Chase to get to a friend's house so then I can get to Rockville. So it's just any way you can get out, basically. Our managers were just saying, go home, get out, be safe.
District police tried its best to control streets clogged with cars. Emergency vehicles screamed through traffic to aid those in danger.
This is scary and it's important, and this is a very devastating kind of attack for everybody.
Pretty numbing kind of thing. You just don't know what to do. You just head home.
And that was the plan for many, who while stuck in gridlock took a moment to contemplate the magnitude of this day.
It felt like we're watching Pearl Harbor. Seeing an attack on America this big, and who knows what we're going to do next.
The question now for all of those workers who left the district barely halfway through this workday is, what will tomorrow be like? Will people be hesitant to return to their offices? We may not have the answer to that question definitively until tomorrow morning's rush hour. Reporting live from the National Mall, Suzanne Kennedy, ABC 7 News. Back to you.
Suzanne, thanks very much.
We were talking throughout the day. This is a story that's tough enough for us to report to you, but those of us that are parents, what are you supposed to tell your children?
Well, we're joined now by child psychiatrist Peter Bregan for some help. I know my own children who see so much news because of my job called up, and there was such a tentativeness and nervousness in their voice as they were evacuated from school, because that really brought home for them the impact of this.
In any kind of disaster, the most important thing is the child's relationship with the parents. The feeling the parents are secure, the parents will be there to take care of you, that the parents have some kind of basic answers. It's a time to get closer to your kids, and the most difficult things for children under any kind of stress is to feel separated, to feel the parents are overwhelmed, feel the parents can't talk to them. So this is a very good time, even working as hard as you are, to stay in touch with your children and talk to them on the phone and let them know you're okay and they're okay.
Is there going to be a psychological impact on the parents as well? This is the first generation that has not lived through, people that are in their 20s now don't remember Vietnam. They've heard it talked about. They don't remember Pearl Harbor. They've read about it. This is the Pearl Harbor for the baby boomer generation of post-Vietnam.
Well, and if we think about Pearl Harbor, it gave meaning to this country. It brought the country together. The country was in a depression at the time. And I think one of the ways that parents should approach this event is to bring them together with their children, to tell them about America, to tell them that this is something that we endure because we stand for values, that we stand for freedom. Make it into something positive. The TV was reporting yesterday that a lot of young people don't even know when the Declaration of Independence was signed. Now's the time to talk to your children about what this country stands for, to put it in a context and give it some meaning.
This is a story that's going to be inescapable. Turning on any news channel, you'll see it. Washington Post has just come out with a special edition in which this is the incredible banner headline. We're hearing, I'm going to hold that up just a little bit longer. We're going to hear, we are hearing just now that they are talking about a death toll of at least 100 people at the Pentagon. And should you talk about the story in terms of those kinds of details with children?
Well, I think you should keep your child company with the story in whatever terms the child's beginning to learn about it. So you want to be asking your kid, what have you heard and what do you know? And then respond to that. And keep in mind that what you want to communicate is that we're still in the safest country in the world, that your child's safe and that you're safe and that your relationship is safe, because that's where children ultimately get their security.
Based on your past experience, how long does it take, though, before you feel safe? Parents can tell children that you're safe, but even for those of us that are living through this, how long is it going to be before we feel safe?
Well, I think to feel meaningful maybe is the better answer. I'm glad to be here today. I feel a lot safer here because I'm making a contribution. I'm with people I care about. It's a time for people to connect in every way they can, and in particular with their children.
It's probably why we've seen so many people donating blood, too, because people do want to get involved and feel like they can help. Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Dr. Peter Bregan. Before we return to ABC's coverage of today's events, we want to look at some very telling pictures from New York City.
Well, it was really a picture-perfect, beautiful morning in Manhattan, with commuters heading for the city as usual, and also the city beginning to go about its business.
Then the skyline there changed forever. Between 8:45 and 9:03 this morning, two planes crashed into the towers of the World Trade Center, setting them both ablaze before both collapsed in clouds of dust and ash.
And then a plane that took off from Dulles would soon crash into the Pentagon. And the death toll here in Washington and New York is still unknown, but New York Mayor Giuliani says his sense is that it is a horrendous number of lives lost.
We will be back for a local update at 6 o'clock and then throughout the evening. You can also get the latest information from our website at WJLA.com. But for now, we're going to go back to ABC News coverage and Peter Jennings. Thank you for joining us.
The possibility that someone who did this had some time in a simulator.
There is a high likelihood that if you were going to plan this again over a period of time, a year or two, that you could, if you were the planning organization, find a way to get your pilots that you wanted trained into a simulator someplace in the world. There are a lot of 757 and 767 training, or a lot of it available. And, you know, our people train air crews from all over the world, our people meaning in the United States. We wouldn't necessarily have any clue of what was in their hearts or what they were planning to do if they came in the door from a legitimate carrier or even a private operator of a 757, because there are some private ones out there.
Thank you, John. Is there anything else you need to add? Please go ahead.
Yeah, just one other thing. This is an unusual situation, and one of the little flags in this, Peter, at this early stage is the fact that we're talking about only 757s and 767s. That is the only combination of big airplanes that have what we call a common type rating. In other words, if you're rated in one, you can fly the other. The cockpits are almost identical. And that may be of no consequence here. It may have simply been coincidental, but it also raises a little flag that maybe we are dealing with somebody who planned this on the basis of having trained for this type of airplane.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much indeed, which certainly speaks to the point that any number of analysts of terrorism, somebody said this morning, nobody wants to be described as an expert on terrorism today, as analysts of terrorism and terrorism activity, and who try to monitor it around the world as effectively as they can, have said this was today a very sophisticated operation. We do know now, we believe, that about 100 people are believed to have been killed or injured in today's attack on the Pentagon. And as John McCarthy from the Pentagon has said to us on several occasions, there is no guarantee that that is the final number. But currently, the information from the Pentagon is that 100 people are believed to have been killed or injured in today's attack. And you recall that Mayor Giuliani of New York, the closest he has come to giving casualty figures, which he's very understandably reluctant to do, that 2,100 people were injured, 600 taken to hospital, 1,500 walking wounded taken to Liberty State Park, which is on the other side of the Hudson River, actually in New Jersey, where the Statue of Liberty, all this in full view of the Statue of Liberty, and that various hospitals from New York City all the way to Canada are treating people today who have been somehow injured in this. Now, I want to talk to Lynn Scher, who has been following the aircraft all day. That is the American and United Airlines planes involved in these incidents. Lynn?
As you well know, the only video that we've seen of an actual crash was of that second flight. That was the United flight that crashed into the second World Trade Tower. What we're going to show you now is some very crude animation of the first flight. That was American Airlines 11. That's the flight from Boston to Los Angeles that went into the first World Trade Tower. What this is animation based on the track of the plane, data coming from the FAA. You're going to hear Walter Cross, the programmer, describing it.
The flight took an immediate hard left turn due south. The speed initially decreased by over 100 miles an hour and then increased to over 500. And then as it approached the New York area, it slowed to all the way down to about 300 knots. So, and then tragically it impacted in the World Trade Center. American 11 was indeed the first flight. We have confirmed that, of the two.
And that, again, that was the voice of Walter Cross, the programmer who put that animation together. What that shows you is this flight on its way to Los Angeles headed due west and then made that very sharp turn. Mr. Cross also told us that there was an indication of some air violence right before that left-hand turn, violent changes in airspeed as the plane went off track to head into the World Trade Towers. On that flight, 92 people, not counting the hijacker. And Peter, I've done some very quick calculations. Of course, all of the planes involved in today's incidents were headed to California. 3 of them to Los Angeles, 1 to San Francisco, 2 had left Boston, 1 from Dulles, 1 from Newark Airport. Total number of passengers and crew, 266 people, not, of course, counting the hijackers. Peter?
Thanks very much, Lynn. And the issue of taking off from Boston and Dulles and all headed for California, John Miller raised the issue before of whether or not, there are lots of reasons, and again we'd be speculating, but he makes the point that aircraft taking off from Boston and Dulles outside Washington to go to California would have full loads of fuel on them, thereby creating a far greater explosive potential without having had to have explosives on board and getting them past U.S. security either at Dulles Airport or at Boston. 266 people on the aircraft alone today who have died in this attack on the United States and on the American people. Now, in our control room, somebody says there is a... Let me go first to Bill Blakemore and then perhaps to Joe Torres of WABC, our affiliate in New York. Bill Blakemore, you there? And I gather you saw number 7 come down.
Yes, I did, Peter. I'm standing right on the West Side Highway. The skyline of the financial district has changed again. Just a few minutes ago, I was talking to some people. I was facing north. I saw shock in their face, heard screams, spun around, and then we just watched the building fall in on itself. I believe we have a little bit of tape here. That's, Peter, it was an astonishing thing because the civilians who were standing around here were all amazed, but things have become so bizarre down here that the hundreds of firemen who were standing around looked at it, felt a bit shocked, but then just said, well, we're going to have even more work to do. Associate producer Lucy Kerrigan had been over near that building just a little bit earlier, and the policeman had told her that they feared the building was going to come down, that they were evacuating people from around it. So that's one little bit of good news, is that there may have been fewer casualties from this latest collapse than there otherwise might have been because they knew of the potential. But it's now still a very hot day here. The search and rescue operation is mounting even larger. There are dozens and dozens of fire trucks backed up on the West Side Highway, police trucks. There are what look like hundreds of volunteers who have showed up, who have been marshaled by the Red Cross, all with masks to avoid breathing in dust, but nobody can go in yet. We're still looking at buildings that are on fire down in the center of the financial district, and it's clearly a great deal of devastation. It's not too strong a word at all. It's going to take a while even to assess how bad it is.
Bill, do you have any idea whether or not other buildings in the immediate area are vulnerable at the moment, whether there's concern about any other building as there was about this additional one after the towers?
Well, from the angle I'm looking at, we can see one other building still on fire, and it seems to be on fire through the length of it. I would estimate that's like about a 30 or 40 story building. The problem for any one of us, of course, is that because of the other buildings down here still standing, which are so tall, you can't get a very clean view of the whole thing from the ground. But there's at least one, and it's clearly going to go on into the night. There's a lot of black smoke pouring out of that building now.
Thank you, Bill. Just we just stay with this photograph or this graphic for just a second. Well, no, there's number 7 coming down. When you think that part of the component of news coverage around the country every year is the excitement and the fun that people get watching an old building being demolished, and they wire it very carefully for days, and it's a very careful operation in order to make sure that a building comes down safely. I think the last one we saw was when they brought down one of the old casinos in Las Vegas. I mean, this is just stunning to see these things come down inside, in the case of the north and south towers there of the World Trade Center, come down within a couple of hours as a result of the structural damage, weakening that was done when these aircraft hit them. And now number 7, the World Trade Center, which is 47 stories tall. We're talking with the World Trade Center north and south 110 stories tall. an eerie experience to be in them at the best of times. They sway in the wind, and people have long had experiences with them. But those, and as Bill Blakemore said just a moment ago, the landscape of New York City has changed one again. And in this instance, it's not New York City, it's not New Yorkers' cities, it's everybody in the country's city at this moment, because this was an attack on the United States, no question about it. Everybody said it all day, a declaration of war, an act of war against the United States. We've had a number of politicians and commentators, us included, who were reminded that the last time there was an attack like this on the United States was Pearl Harbor, which finally induced the United States to get fully involved in World War II. And we're going to go on all day, and we'll continue throughout the night trying to get some grasp of this. What do we know at the moment? The President is on his way back to Washington, and we're not certain whether he's going to be helicoptered in from Andrews Air Force Base, which is tradition, but the security apparatus is concerned, and so he may come in a motorcade. I can't remember the last time a president went or came from Andrews Air Force Base in a motorcade. Even maybe the last time was Bill Clinton. No, I don't even think Bill Clinton at the end of his inauguration went out. But there's another example. And the president wants to speak to the nation. And Linda Douglas reports from Capitol Hill that the leadership in Congress tonight wants to have. You have who on the telephone? I didn't know that. I did not know that. I apologize. Thank you. First time I've heard about it. Judge Webster?
Peter.
I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know you were on the phone.
No, it's been very interesting, and I'm glad to listen.
Thank you, sir. This is Judge William Webster, the former director of the FBI, on the phone, one of the and the CIA as well, as my friend John Miller points out. Judge Webster, maybe you could help us understand many things, but at the outset, when this happened today, does this overwhelm the FBI and drive the CIA into some kind of turmoil at the same time?
When it happened today, is that your question?
Yes, sir.
It seemed to me that they responded quickly. The FBI's emergency operations centers were in place. CIA, of course, is going back to its intelligence and see what they had, what they didn't have. I think what you usually find in a situation like that is grim determination to do a good job. I don't think it's any kind of frustration or frenzy.
And as you have watched these events unfold today, and perhaps even talked to your colleagues, your former colleagues in the FBI and the CIA, what's your appreciation of this as a whole event?
Well, it's an extraordinary event, and it brings home what we've been saying about the change of terrorism in the last 20 years, as it moves from fewer numbers, trying to make a political point, to doing extreme damage. This reached a high level of capacity to do damage in that way, and it needs to be addressed as such. When you think about what has happened today and the tremendous tragedy and calamity, it didn't involve nuclear weapons, it didn't involve biological weapons, it didn't involve equipment, artillery, Scuds, or anything. It involved the ability to steal 4 or 5 airplanes and to send them on a course of destruction. That's within the capacity of non-governmental organizations such as the kind you've been talking about.
And do you believe, Judge Webster, because there's a lot of armchair observation today, and I don't mean to include you in that, a lot of armchair observation from many of us, do you believe that this in any way, shape, or form could have been prepared for, if not prevented?
You'd like to think that you could prepare for every kind of calamity, but you also like to think that we live in a society that we're very proud of in terms of the freedoms we enjoy, and the freedoms to travel is one of those. Freedom from violence is another one, to the extent that we can know about it. Knowing is the difficult thing. In my years of experience, terrorism was the most difficult because of the cellular nature of decision-making at the top. Even the people who were in the organization would not know until the last minute what was going to take place. I hope we can develop better means of profiling the kinds of people who could do damage, and I'm not talking about highway racial profiling or anything. I'm talking about looking for people that fit profiles of behavior that would be more helpful.
As I listen to you say that, Judge Webster, I think about Timothy McVeigh. Nobody had Timothy McVeigh down as a profile.
No, they didn't. But if they
in Oklahoma City, and many of the profiles we do seem to be the obvious ones. Pick on a member of a developing nation because the nation is antagonistic, or the group because it's antagonistic to the United States. I mean, is this the most efficient way to do it?
No, I think that was just one of the things that we're trying to say, should we tighten up? It's not clear to me that we don't know enough yet to draw any firm conclusions about whether or not people were able to walk on board those airplanes with weapons that pass through the screening devices. We just don't know yet, and we shouldn't draw conclusions about that. But I think we have to be sure that we have done everything we can to know in advance. Getting there before the bomb goes off is the ultimate objective. And it requires a lot of cooperation now internationally. We have to share information with our friends around the world about movements of people who are believed to be bent on violence. It's a very tough assignment, and it's one in which we can see now we're going to have tighten our belts, because I think, again, when the reports of the casualties is finally released, it's going to be a lot more than anybody expected, and probably will be more, or at least approximate the size. We haven't had anything like it since Pearl Harbor.
Judge Webster, I don't mean to make you the target of criticism today. It's not my intention at all. But as I listen to you talk about we got to tighten our belt and our defenses, it's what we hear after almost every incident of terrorism. And I wonder what you think, as you've listened and watched today, what you think more could be done that the United States hasn't been doing up until now that is humanly possible in a free society.
I think we've been very educated and sophisticated in knowing what we needed to do. The counter-terrorist centers that have been formed to be sure that information is properly recognized and passed along to the people. Those are things that can, in an evolutionary way, can be improved. Human intelligence, of course, is what everyone will call for now, and we should have it. But we shouldn't fool ourselves that it's something we can automatically take off the shelf and put in place in terrorist organizations.
At the time that human intelligence, you call it in your trade, was downgraded as part of the national effort against terrorism, were you supportive of it being downgraded?
Actually, that was before I came on board. It seems to me that we've been trying ever since 1978 to improve, or at least 1980, to improve the quality of human intelligence. And in some cases, we were very successful. I recall the Armenian terrorist incidents in the late 1970s and 80s. We were able to get there and interdict the bombs, one in San Francisco, one in Los Angeles, one with explosives en route to New York, and the other in Canada. We know what we need to do, and in some cases we can do it, but we're dealing with some very, very powerful and sophisticated competition here.
Judge Webster, I'm very grateful you joined us. I'm sorry to keep you waiting, but I have one more question for you. Whenever there's a debate or a discussion about the freedom of Americans and the freedom of movement Americans should enjoy under these circumstances, the director of the FBI is always right there at the center. And there's always a debate, there's always an inclination to think that you and the FBI, you want to make it tougher for Americans to move about because it's easier for you to do your job under those circumstances. What's your message to the American people today about retaining their freedoms in the face of this kind of enemy?
I think the message is that we can't have a pendulum swinging back and forth from repression to anarchy. And I think we've done a pretty good job of finding that center, which Edmund Burke 300 years ago called ordered liberty. Mm-hmm. We need to have liberty, but it has to be one accompanied by order. And professionals are very willing to do their job under court orders and the appropriate procedures. All that they ask is that they not be unduly burdened by restrictions that in times like this get in the way of finding the culprits and bringing them to justice.
Judge Webster, thank you very much for giving us the time. We'd like to hear from you later on, so we're very grateful to you at the moment. Thank you. Two things the judge said,
Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome, sir. Two things the judge says which just leap off the page, John Miller, to me. Clearly, one is the Edmund Burke quote when he talks about liberty. It has to be ordered liberty. And the other, in terms of talking about the capacity of the terrorists today, said there were no scuds involved. There was just the capacity to steal 4 planes.
And we had talked earlier about airline security. How do you get a gun on an airplane? unconfirmed reports from these cellular phone calls that were made to 911 from one of the flights saying that a flight attendant had been stabbed. Perhaps they didn't have a gun. Certainly, the GAO and the General Accounting Office of Congress and the FAA and airline securities consultants have demonstrated over and over again that if you're careful enough and you plan it, you can get a weapon onto a plane. And they've demonstrated exactly how, which I won't describe here for obvious reasons.
Right.
So this is security that's designed to harden the target, the airplane. Certainly, there's no such thing as total security there. And terrorism, I mean, if you look at this most incredible, unprecedented, historic act of terrorism, it still harkens back to what we see in the World Trade Center, Oklahoma City, the embassy bombings. We talk about the level of sophistication in planning, maybe, but the actual act is usually very low tech. A bomb made of fertilizer and fuel oil, things you can look up and buy on the internet, hijacking an airplane, perhaps even with sharpened instruments. Now, the aspect that there may have been people trained to fly these planes, that's a new wrinkle.
That is indeed.
Certainly on conventional hijacking. I can give you an update from the scene as things are developing there. If there can be any good news about a day like today, the collapse of 7 World Trade Center, the building they were so worried about injuring rescue workers, has freed up rescue workers to now go into the area, and they are moving in groups of 20 and 50 as their teams are designated.
So the principal danger to the rescue and recovery teams has been eliminated.
The biggest danger has literally removed itself. Right. One of the first teams going in is a team of tow trucks, which is literally going to pull rigs that are fire trucks, police trucks that are buried in rubble out of the way so that they can clear a path and bring in other vehicles. And they've requested a number of dogs. Additionally, 100 doctors...
I'm sorry to keep interrupting.
Sure.
Explain why they want dogs.
They want bloodhounds, cadaver dogs, the kind of dogs that can climb up in the rubble with them and catch the scent of people that they can dig for in such a big pile of rubble.
It is a strange name for a specialty, but there are indeed things called cadaver dogs. Anybody who called it the Condit investigation know that they were used in, et cetera. Go on,
right.
Please.
100 doctors, 100 nurses are standing by the main police facility that is now the command post for the NYPD, not police headquarters, but an off-site location further up into Midtown, has them standing by waiting for somewhere to send them. And essentially, this long operation, which will be the longest night for New York's rescue workers, has just begun.
And thank you, John. And Cynthia McFadden, I believe, is now at Chelsea Piers, a large sports entertainment complex on the west side of Manhattan, or at least close to it, which, Cynthia, was described earlier as a makeshift morgue. Is that really what it's going to be?
No, it's not, Peter. What they've decided to do here is make this the triage center. We've been told that all victims now who are taken out of the blast site are going to be taken here first. They'll be tagged before they get here, determine what the severity of their condition is, and then once they arrive here, they'll be treated initially and then sent on to other hospitals. I should also tell you that inside this has been described to me, you can see behind me, ambulances. What you can't see probably is that there are probably 200 or 250 ambulances lined up here on the west side highways, waiting. These are empty ambulances waiting to distribute patients or potential victims all over the tri-state area to hospitals. Peter, inside, it's been described, we got a look inside earlier, it really looks like a MASH unit. It's 50 operating suites set up, hundreds of doctors and nurses here to treat the wounded. They have been here, standing here for hours now. There are no patients here yet. The latest estimate is that there won't be any people here for several more hours. What we're told is, and I was just listening to John Miller, part of the problem initially was that when the first rescue workers went in, and we've talked to some of them who have, some of the second wave of rescue workers, the first wave of rescue workers who went in were trapped, many of them killed by the second blast. And so when the second workers came out, many of whom are now here, they wouldn't allow anyone back in the area, which is why there aren't any patients here at the moment.
Well, Cynthia, let me just go a little farther with that. You say 250 ambulances standing around waiting to pull people out. You'd be talking about pulling people out of the rubble at this point. The mayor reminded people across the country there are 170 hospitals in New York City, and aside from St. Vincent's, the principal nearest hospital, which lost, among other things, its emergency power, I think, and lost its gas operating facility at the time, wasn't it, John?
That was Beekman Downtown or New York Infirmary that lost its steam power. St. Vincent's then actually had to bear the brunt of this.
And so people have gone directly to hospital. I don't quite understand, Cynthia, the who's going to come to Chelsea Piers until they begin to rescue people, hopefully, from the rubble itself.
Peter, the initial thought, and of course, as you know, we've been to Bellevue today, a couple of other places. There have been hundreds of people at area hospitals, as you note, but they don't believe that anywhere near the full weight of this has yet been uncovered, that there are hundreds and thousands of people who have been injured in this blast, and that's the people that they expect to bring here.
Okay.
St. Vincent's is saturated at this point. They're intending now, whether this happens, but the emergency medical services that's running this